The air in the grand chasm was thick enough to drink, tasting of sulfur, hot stone, and the metallic tang of a century's worth of fear. Below, in the mountain's deepest heart, the hollow flame pulsed with a malevolent, hungry light, casting flickering shadows that danced like tormented spirits against the obsidian walls. Tonight, it burned brighter than it had in living memory, a lurid wound in the belly of the earth. As High Priestess, it was my duty to stand before it. But all I felt was a cold, blasphemous rage. They called him a god, a protector, a necessary wrath. I called him a monster, and tonight I would name him so. This hollow, sacred dread was a cage, and we were all its prisoners, waiting for the jailer to claim his tithe. My ceremonial robes felt like a shroud, woven from silk and complicity. The heavy obsidian amulet on my chest was a stone of guilt, pressing down on my heart with the weight of every girl who had been sacrificed before me. I stood on the precipice of the altar of ember, my back to the cowering assembly, my face bathed in the oppressive, rhythmic heat of the hollow flame. It was a pillar of pure, white-hot energy rising from a chasm so deep its bottom had never been seen, only imagined in nightmares of molten rock and scorched bone. Before me, lining the edge of the sacred circle, were this year's chosen, 10 girls, none older than 19, their faces pale masks of stoic terror. They had been bred for this, taught that to be chosen by the Dragon Lord, Varen Kareth, was the highest honor, a beautiful lie to make the slaughter palatable. I met their eyes one by one, eyes filled with the desperate, silent plea for a different fate. I had no different fate to give them. I was merely the master of a ceremony I despised. High Priestess Leora. Elder Maeve's voice was a dry rasp behind me, thin and brittle as old parchment. The hour is upon us, the flame is at its zenith. You must speak the invocation and anoint the chosen. Anoint the chosen, a gentle term for marking one of them for death. I was supposed to take the ceremonial bowl of ash and oil, trace the sigil of servitude onto one girl's forehead, and condemn her to be dragged into the mountain's heart, never to be seen again. My hands, hidden in the voluminous sleeves of my robe, curled into fists, my nails digging into my palms. The small pain was an anchor in a sea of helpless fury. For years I had performed this duty with a heart turned to stone, my voice a hollow echo of the prayers I no longer believed in. But not tonight. Tonight, the silence in my soul had curdled into a scream. I turned slowly, my gaze sweeping over the huddled figures of the elders, their faces grim and self-important. They clung to this tradition like frightened children to a dark fairy tale, convinced that this annual sacrifice was all that stood between our village of Etheria and the dragon's fiery annihilation. They spoke of balance, of an ancient pact. I saw only cowardice, dressed in the finery of faith. My eyes landed on the youngest of the girls, Elena. Her lower lip trembled uncontrollably, and a single tear traced a path through the ceremonial white dust on her cheek. She looked just like my sister had. All those years ago, the same wide, terrified eyes, the same soul-deep certainty of her own doom. That memory, sharp and jagged, was the final catalyst. I picked up the ceremonial bowl, its polished obsidian surface cool against my feverish skin. The scent of burnt herbs and sacred oil filled my nostrils, a perfume of death. I walked not towards the line of trembling girls, but towards the very edge of the chasm, the heat of the hollow flame searing my face, whipping my dark hair back from my brow. The roar from below was not a sound, but a vibration that shook the marrow in my bones. "High Priestess, what are you doing?" Elder Maeve hissed, taking a nervous step forward. "The ritual must be observed." I ignored her. I held the bowl aloft, the slurry of ash and oil catching the infernal light. My voice, when I spoke, did not tremble. It was clear and sharp as shattered glass, ringing out across the cavern and silencing the fearful murmurs of the crowd. "We gather here to honor a pact," I began, the traditional words tasting like poison on my tongue. "We offer a life to appease the hunger of the mountain, to placate the wrath of the Dragon Lord." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the fear and anticipation build. Then I turned my head, my eyes locking with Elder Maeve's. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "But what is a pact made with a monster? What is honor paid to a cage-keeper? What is a god who feeds on the innocent but a tyrant?" A collective gasp swept through the cavern. The guards at the perimeter shifted, their hands tightening on their spears. Elder Maeve's face went from pale to ashen. "Leora, blasphemy! You will bring his wrath down upon us all." "His wrath is already upon us," I shouted, my voice now raw with years of suppressed grief and rage. "It is in the faces of these girls. It is in the memory of my sister and her mother's mother before her. It is in the very stone beneath our feet, a foundation built on fear." With a final defiant cry, I hurled the ceremonial bowl, not at a girl's forehead, but into the chasm itself. It vanished into the pillar of white-hot light, consumed without a trace. Then I did the unthinkable. I lifted my chin, faced the roaring heart of the mountain, and spoke the curse that had been forming in my soul for a decade. "I curse you, Varenkareth," I screamed, the words tearing from my throat. "Jailer of the flame, devourer of innocence, may the fire you command turn to ash in your throat. May the stone of your mountain prison crumble around you. May you know the agony of every soul you have stolen, and may you choke on the memory of their fear for eternity." For a moment, there was absolute stunned silence. The only sound was the deep, thrumming hum of the hollow flame. The air grew heavy, impossibly still. The light from the chasm began to flicker, not with its usual rhythmic pulse, but with a frantic, angry beat. The temperature in the cavern plummeted, a sudden, unnatural chill that raised goosebumps on every arm. Then the true roar came. It was not the sound of the flame. It was something deeper, something ancient and alive. A sound that ripped through the stone, through the air, through the very fabric of being. It was a roar of fury, and of something else. Something that sounded impossibly like recognition. The pillar of white fire exploded upwards, a geyser of pure energy that licked the cavern ceiling hundreds of feet above. Panic erupted. People screamed, scrambling back, tripping over one another in their haste to flee. The elders shouted contradictory orders, their authority dissolving into raw terror. From the heart of that blinding light, a shadow emerged. It was colossal, a form of living obsidian and dying embers. Wings, vast and membranous, unfurled to their full, terrifying span, eclipsing the light of the flame and plunging the cavern into a dreadful twilight. A serpentine neck, thick as an ancient tree trunk, craned upwards, and a head carved from nightmare and stone fixed its gaze upon the chaos. His scales were the color of a starless midnight, scarred and pitted from millennia of slumber or battle, I couldn't tell. Veins of what looked like cooling magma pulsed with a faint orange light beneath the surface. And then I saw his eyes. They were not the eyes of a beast. They were ancient, intelligent, and burning with a molten gold light that seemed to see not just me, but through me, into the deepest, most secret corners of my soul. Varenkareth had come. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Elder Maeve, her face contorted with a mask of pure, vindictive terror, pointed a trembling finger at me. "Seize the blasphemer! Offer her to him! An apology for her sacrilege!" Two of the temple guards, their faces grim but resolved, broke from the panicking crowd and charged towards me. Their spears were leveled, not to kill, but to capture, to force me to the edge, to make me the impromptu sacrifice. I stood my ground, my heart hammering against my ribs not with fear, but with a strange, fatalistic calm. I had spoken my truth. If this was the price, I would pay it. But before the guards could reach me, the dragon moved. It was a movement of impossible speed for a creature so immense. His massive head swept down, a blur of shadow and heat. A growl like the grinding of tectonic plates tore from his throat. It was not a sound of hunger, but of warning. A blast of superheated air, devoid of flame but potent with sheer thermal energy, erupted from his nostrils, striking the ground before the guard's feet. The stone floor cracked and hissed, glowing cherry red for a moment before turning to blackened glass. The guards recoiled, crying out in shock and pain, their boots smoking. They stumbled back, their spears forgotten, their eyes wide with a new kind of terror. They had expected the dragon to accept their offering. They had not expected him to refuse it, to defend it. Varenkareth shifted his colossal body, placing himself between me and the rest of my people. I was completely enveloped in his shadow, a strange sanctuary of darkness in the fiery cavern. The heat radiating from his scales was intense, but it wasn't the searing, destructive heat of the flame. It was a deep, primal warmth, like standing near the core of the world. The scent of ozone, hot metal, and something else, something ancient and faintly floral, like mountain blossoms petrified in stone, filled my senses. He lowered his head until his golden eyes were level with mine. They were larger than my entire torso, swirling pools of liquid fire and time. I could see my own reflection in their depths, a small defiant figure bathed in an unholy light. There was no rage in his gaze now. There was something far more terrifying, curiosity, intensity, and a flicker of something that looked like pain. The elders, the guards, the entire village, they all faded into the background, their fear a distant, buzzing noise. The universe had contracted to this space between us, the dragon and the woman who had cursed his name. He held me there with his gaze for a long, silent eternity. The chaos behind me died down, replaced by a horrified, breathless hush. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. Then a voice echoed, not through the cavern, but directly inside my mind. It was not spoken. It was felt. A deep, resonant vibration that seemed to originate from my own bones. The voice was ancient, layered with the echoes of millennia, like stones grinding together at the bottom of a timeless ocean. Yours was not a curse. The voice resonated within me, shaking my soul to its very foundation. It was a summons. My breath hitched. My carefully constructed walls of rage and defiance crumbled into dust. This was impossible. This was not the mindless beast of wrath from the legends. This was something else entirely. He moved again, a motion so deliberate and slow it was almost gentle. The tip of one colossal obsidian claw, longer than my arm and sharp enough to shear through granite, lifted from the ground. It moved towards me, a point of absolute darkness against the fiery backdrop. I flinched, a primal instinct to flee warring with a paralyzing fascination. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the deadly point came closer. It didn't pierce my skin. It didn't tear me apart. Instead, the claw stopped just before my face. The razor-sharp edge gently, impossibly, tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The brief touch was like being grazed by living, superheated stone, a fleeting brand of impossible intimacy. Then his voice filled the cavern, this time spoken aloud. It was the sound of an avalanche given speech, a force of nature condescending to use words. Every syllable was laden with absolute, unshakable power. "This one," Varenkareth declared, his golden eyes never leaving mine, but his voice booming for all to hear, "is mine." The word hung in the superheated air, a sentence and a salvation all at once, mine. It was a word of possession, of absolute authority, and yet, in the molten gold depths of his eyes, it felt like something else entirely, a shield, a declaration not of ownership, but of sanctuary. The terror that should have been consuming me was held at bay by a profound, bewildering sense of stillness. The universe had stopped its frantic spinning and was now pivoting on this single, impossible moment. Behind the bulwark of his immense form, I could hear the panicked, furious whispers of the elders. "He has taken her," someone breathed. "The blasphemer is his choice." Elder Maeve's voice cut through the rest, sharp and venomous. "This is a dark omen. Her tainted soul will curdle his temper. He will return and unmake us all for her sins." Varenkareth paid them no mind. His attention was a physical weight, focused entirely on me. His massive head tilted, a gesture so impossibly ancient it felt like watching a mountain shift. The sound of his exhale was like a slow, hot wind moving through a canyon, carrying the scent of deep earth and ozone. Without turning, a low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the stone floor and up into my bones. "You will leave," he commanded the assembly, his voice not a shout, but an edict that could not be defied. "The ritual is concluded." There was a frantic scramble of movement, the sound of sandals slapping against stone as my people fled their god. They did not need to be told twice. They left me in the dragon's shadow, a final, damning act of abandonment. I was no longer their high priestess. I was a sacrifice, just as I had always feared, but in a way I had never imagined. When the last echo of their flight faded, a profound silence descended upon the grand chasm. All that remained was the deep, sonorous hum of the hollow flame and the soft, rhythmic sound of the dragon's breathing. He remained motionless for a long time, a living statue of obsidian and embers, his gaze holding mine, searching for something I could not name. "You are not afraid," his voice resonated in my mind again. A statement of fact, not a question. I found my own voice, though it was a mere whisper against the cavern's immensity. "I have spent my life fearing a mindless monster. You are not what I was taught." A slow plume of gray smoke, like a sigh, curled from his nostrils. "They taught you of my cage, not of the prisoner within." Before I could process the meaning of his words, he moved. He drew back his head and extended one of his forelegs. The claws, each a scythe of polished obsidian, gently scraped against the stone. He curled them inward, forming a makeshift cup with his palm, the scales shimmering like black diamonds in the firelight. He lowered it to the ground before me, an offering of transport. An invitation. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth, to step into the grasp of the beast who had haunted my people's history. But the alternative, to remain here, alone, branded a heretic to be torn apart by my own kin, should they ever muster the courage, was no choice at all. And more than that, a strange, inexplicable trust was blooming in the space where my terror should have been. The being who had defended me from my own people would not harm me now. I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped onto his palm. The scales were not rough or jagged as I had expected, but smooth and warm, like river stones heated by a summer sun. The sheer scale of it was dizzying. I was a doll in the hand of a god. As I settled myself, he slowly, deliberately curled his claws around me, not to crush, but to create a protective cage. The tips met high above my head, blocking out the light of the hollow flame, enclosing me in a warm, secure darkness that smelled of stone and ancient power. The world tilted as he lifted me from the ground. There was no jarring motion, only a smooth, effortless ascent. Then, with a power that defied belief, he turned and stepped not away from the chasm, but directly into it. My stomach plunged. I braced myself for the searing, unmaking heat of the hollow flame. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting to be turned to ash in an instant. But the heat never came. Instead, the roar of the flame was all around us, a deafening symphony of power. Yet inside his grasp, I was untouched. It felt as if we had passed through the fire, into a space behind it, a reality hidden within the inferno. The descent was long and silent. There was only the feeling of movement, a slow gravitational pull into the depths of the earth. When the motion finally ceased, his claws slowly uncurled, and light returned to my world. It was not the angry, white-hot light of the hollow flame. This light was soft, silvery, and seemed to emanate from the very stone of the walls. We were in a cavern so vast it felt like an underground sky. The ceiling was lost in shadows, but I could see constellations of faintly glowing crystals embedded in the rock, mimicking the stars I had left behind. The air here was clean and cool, tasting of deep earth and rainwater, entirely devoid of the sulfurous stench from above. The floor was worn smooth, polished by the passage of millennia. This was no rough-hewn lair. It was a hall, a palace at the heart of the world. Baron Kareth gently lowered his hand, allowing me to step onto the smooth stone floor. I stumbled slightly, my legs unsteady, and looked up at him. Here, away from the distorting glare of the flame, I could see him more clearly. He was magnificent and terrible. Ancient scars crisscrossed his scales, some thin and silvery, others deep gouges that glowed with a faint residual heat, as if he had been wounded by weapons of pure fire. One of his horns was broken, the tip sheared off in some long-forgotten battle. This was not just a jailer, this was a warrior, a king in exile. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice barely an echo in the immense space. "My home," he said, and the word, spoken aloud, resonated with a profound and terrible sadness. "And my prison, one and the same." He began to move, his claws making soft, rhythmic clicks against the stone, and I followed, too awestruck to do anything else. We walked through archways that dwarfed him, past pillars that seemed to hold up the world. Faded, intricate carvings covered every surface, telling stories of dragons and stars and a world before men. It was a place of deep, lonely majesty. We came at last to a central chamber, circular and even larger than the others. In its center, A single slender flame, no larger than my hand, burned with a pure silver light, mirroring the crystals above. It gave off no heat, only a gentle, calming luminescence. Around it, the floor was carved with a circle of intricate, interlocking runes, a language of power I had only ever seen in the most forbidden scrolls of the temple archives. "The hollow flame is a lie," I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "A vulgar echo, this is the true source." "It is what remains of it," his voice corrected me in my mind. He settled his colossal body near the silver flame, curling into a posture of rest, though his golden eyes remained fixed on me, vigilant and weary. "The fire you see above is the brute force of my power, given form, and turned back upon itself to create my prison. A crude lock on a complex cage." My mind reeled. "A prison, but the legends all say you chose this mountain, that you sleep here to guard the world's heart." A sound that might have been a humorless laugh rumbled in his chest, a low, grating noise. "Legends are stories told by the victors, or by those too afraid to seek the truth. I am a guardian, it is true, but a guardian who is betrayed and bound to his post." I felt a surge of the defiance that had led me here. Bound by whom? His gaze seemed to turn inward, across eons of memory, by those who feared what I protect, and by a priestess who helped them forge my chains. The words struck me like a physical blow. A priestess, like me. The amulet on my chest suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "I don't understand." "I know," he said, his voice softening, the sound a low vibration that seemed to calm the frantic beating of my heart. "You are not meant to. Not yet. Your memories are fractured, scattered like dust." Before I could ask what he meant by my memories, I felt a sharp sting in my palm. I looked down and saw a thin, deep cut on the heel of my hand, beaded with blood. I must have done it when I threw the ceremonial bowl, its sharp edge grazing my skin. I had been too lost in rage and adrenaline to notice until now. Varen Kareth noticed it too. A low growl emanated from him, not of anger, but of concern. He uncoiled from his resting position, his immense head moving towards me with a terrifying, fluid grace. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as his snout, larger than my entire body, came to a stop just inches from my hand. He let out a short, controlled puff of air from his nostrils. It was not fire, but a wave of concentrated warmth, shimmering with a faint golden light. The heat washed over my hand, and I watched, stunned. As the skin tinged, the bleeding stopped, and the cut sealed itself before my very eyes, leaving behind only a thin, silvery line that faded into nothing a moment later. It was a touch of impossible power, used with the delicacy of a master surgeon, a miracle of healing performed by the monster I had cursed. I stared at my unblemished hand, then back up at his ancient, sorrowful eyes. The last of my fear dissolved, replaced by a wave of emotion so overwhelming it made my knees weak. "Why?" I whispered. "Why are you doing this? Why save me?" "Because your curse was not a weapon," he explained, his mental voice gentle. "It was a key. For millennia, no one has spoken my true name with such power. No one has dared to see past the monster to the prisoner. Your words, they did not strike my chains. They resonated with them. You woke something, not just in me, in the very magic that binds this place." He drew his head back, giving me space. "And I am saving you because your life is now tied to my fate. Those who imprison me will now sense the disturbance. They will know something has changed. To them, you are not a sacrifice. You are a threat, an anomaly to be eliminated." The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I had not only defied my people, I had apparently alerted some ancient unknown power. "Who are they?" "They have no single name," he answered. "They are a legacy, an order, and their reach is long." He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes, a shared burden. "But they cannot reach you here. In this hall, you are safe. You are with me." The words echoed the sentiment of his earlier claim. Mine. I was his to protect. The central conflict of my life had changed in an instant. It was no longer me against the dragon. It was the two of us against the world. Exhaustion, both emotional and physical, suddenly washed over me. I swayed on my feet, the sheer immensity of it all threatening to pull me under. Varen shifted his great body, and a section of the stone floor beside him began to glow with a soft internal warmth. "Rest, Leora Deneth," his voice rumbled softly. "There is much to understand, and it cannot be done in a single night. Sleep, I will keep watch." I sank down onto the warm stone, the gentle heat seeping into my weary bones. I curled up, my ceremonial robes a poor substitute for a blanket, and watched the dragon who was now my guardian. He rested his great head on the floor, his golden eyes remaining open, fixed on the entrance to the chamber, a silent, eternal sentinel. As sleep began to claim me, my gaze drifted across the vast, circular wall of the chamber. My eyes traced the ancient, faded carvings, the epic tales of forgotten eras. And then I saw it. High on the wall, partially obscured by shadow, was a mural that was clearer, more defined than the others. It depicted a dragon, his form identical to Varen's down to the broken horn, coiled around the base of a mountain. And standing before him, her hand resting fearlessly on his snout, was a woman. She wore the robes of a high priestess, and on her chest was an obsidian amulet, the very same one I now wore. Her face was eroded by time, a featureless canvas of stone, but the bond between the two figures was palpable. A silent story of allegiance, not of worship, of partnership, not sacrifice. A cold dread, mingled with a disorienting sense of familiarity, washed over me. "The carving," I murmured, my voice thick with impending sleep. "Who is she?" Varen Kareth did not move, but I felt the weight of his sorrow fill the chamber. His voice, when it came, was a low, aching whisper that would haunt my dreams. "She is the beginning," he said, "the reason the hollow flame is a lie, and the reason you are here." I woke to silence, a deep, profound stillness that was more absolute than any I had ever known. For a moment, suspended between the shores of dream and wakefulness, I didn't know where I was. There was no scent of temple incense, no distant sound of the village, only the cool, clean air of the deep earth. I was lying on a surface of smooth, warm stone, the heat a gentle comfort against my back. Then memory returned in a tidal wave. The hollow flame, the curse, the claim. My eyes snapped open. I was in the vast circular chamber. High above, the crystal constellations cast their soft, silvery light, a private cosmos just for us. The small, pure flame in the center of the room burned steadily, its silent light a beacon in the gloom. And beside it, a mountain of living obsidian, was Varen Kareth. He was exactly where he had been when I'd fallen asleep, his colossal head resting on the stone, his body a fortress of coiled muscle and scale, but his eyes, those burning pools of molten gold, were fixed on me. He had been watching me sleep. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, a strange and unwelcome warmth bloomed in my chest. For the first time in my life, I had slept through the night without the familiar specter of fear at my shoulder. Here, in the lair of the supposed monster, I had felt utterly, completely safe. I pushed myself into a sitting position, my ceremonial robes rustling softly in the stillness. The movement drew a slow blink from the dragon. "You are awake," his voice rumbled, spoken aloud this time, the sound so low it was more a vibration in the stone than a sound in the air. "How long did I sleep?" I asked, my own voice hoarse. "A full rotation of the sun you left behind," he answered. "Your body needed to mend from the shock. Your spirit as well. My spirit. It felt less mended and more shattered, the pieces rearranged into a mosaic I no longer recognized. My gaze was drawn inexorably to the mural on the far wall, to the carved figure of the woman with her hand on the dragon's snout. The priestess, his ally, my predecessor. "You said she was the beginning," I stated, my voice gaining strength. "The reason I am here. Who was she?" A deep sigh, like the shifting of ancient rock, moved through him. He lifted his massive head, the muscles in his serpentine neck cording with the effort. His golden eyes were shadowed with a grief so ancient it seemed to have become part of the stone around us. "Her name was Seraphine," he said, and the name itself was an echo, a ghost of a word spoken with a reverence that bordered on pain. "She was the first high priestess of the flame, the true flame." He nodded his head towards the silver fire in the center of the chamber, not the bastardized inferno they used to appease me above. I rose to my feet and walked slowly toward the mural, my hand outstretched as if I could touch the past. What happened to her? She was like me, Varen continued, his voice a low thrum of memory. A guardian, we were bound not by servitude, but by purpose. The flame we protected was a source of creation, a heart of magic that nurtured the life of the world above. It was a balance. I was its power, she was its conscience. I reached the wall, my fingertips tracing the cold, carved lines of the priestess's robes. They were identical to mine, the same patterns, the same cut. And the amulet, my own felt heavy on my chest, a direct link to this forgotten woman. You said you were betrayed. Did she betray you? The question was a whisper, but in the vast silence, it sounded like a shout. Never, he growled, the word sharp with a loyalty that had survived millennia. She died protecting it, protecting me. His gaze fell, and for the first time, I saw something other than sorrow or power in his eyes. I saw guilt. The order I spoke of, they were men who craved the flame's power for themselves. They could not steal it while both its guardians lived, so they laid a trap. They attacked the temple and Seraphine fell defending it. In my grief, my rage, I was blind. I unleashed the full power of the flame upon them, and that was the moment they had waited for. His story painted a vivid, terrible picture in my mind. A dragon, mad with loss, becoming a storm of living fire. They could not destroy me, he went on, his voice laced with the cold iron of remembered fury. But they had studied the old magic. They used my own power, amplified by Seraphine's absence, to forge my prison. They twisted the pure flame of creation into the hollow flame, a raging, mindless furnace, and they bound me within it, turning my own heart into the walls of my cage. They told the survivors of my rampage that I was a god of wrath who demanded sacrifice. And your people, in their terror, believed the lie. They built a new faith on the ashes of the old one, and the memory of Seraphine was erased, replaced by an endless line of nameless offerings to a monster. I leaned my forehead against the cold stone of the mural, the truth of his words settling into my bones like a deep chill. My entire life, my faith, the history of my people. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed cage built around his own. We weren't his keepers. We were his jailers. Overwhelmed, I slid down the wall to sit on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. My hand went to the obsidian amulet, its surface smooth and cool beneath my trembling fingers. This was hers, I murmured. It was, Varen affirmed. It is a key, a focus, a vessel for the memories of the one who wears it. A vessel. The word sent a shiver down my spine. I clutched it tighter, my knuckles white. As my skin pressed against the stone, a strange energy seemed to hum within it. A deep, resonant pulse that matched the thrumming of Varen's voice. He must have sensed it too, for he shifted, his colossal form uncoiling as he moved closer. He was drawn by the same energy that was making the hairs on my arms stand on end. He stopped before me, his head lowered, his snout just a few feet away. The heat from his body was a comforting presence against the cavern's cool air. The faint internal magma light in his scars pulsed gently. He was so close I could see the intricate fractal patterns of his scales, the ancient wisdom in the depths of his golden eyes. The curse you spoke, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more potent than his roars. You named me jailer of the flame. You demanded the stone of my prison crumble. Those words, they were echoes of the last promise Seraphine ever made to me. You spoke with her voice, her conviction. My heart hammered in my chest. I stared at him, my mind unable to form a response. Without thinking, compelled by an instinct I didn't understand, I reached out my free hand. I didn't know what I intended to do, to ward him off, to steady myself. But my hand moved through the space between us. His eyes widened slightly, a subtle shift in the molten gold. He did not pull away. He held himself perfectly still, a silent act of trust, and allowed my small human hand to come to rest on the scales of his snout. The moment my skin made contact, the world fractured. It wasn't a thought or a sound. It was a feeling, a memory that wasn't mine. A flash of blinding sensation, my consciousness was ripped from the cavern and plunged into another time. I felt the warmth of a summer sun on my skin, smelled the scent of mountain blossoms, not petrified, but fresh and alive. The hand I felt was my own, yet it moved with a familiarity, a tenderness that was utterly alien to me. I was looking up into the same golden eyes, but they were not filled with sorrow. They were filled with a deep, abiding affection. The scales beneath my palm were not the armor of a prisoner, but the hide of a beloved companion. "Varen," a voice whispered. And the voice was mine, yet it held a warmth and love I had never known. The name was not a curse. It was a prayer, a term of endearment. And then I felt his response, not in my mind as a voice, but as a feeling projected back at me through our point of contact. A wave of contentment, of loyalty, of a love so vast and ancient it defied comprehension. The vision shattered as quickly as it had come. I gasped, snatching my hand back as if I'd been burned. I was back in the cavern, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stared at my hand, then at Varen. He had recoiled slightly, his great head pulling back a few inches, a plume of smoke escaping his nostrils. His eyes were wide, the golden fire within them turbulent, as if I had stirred a long slumbering storm. The memory had not just been mine. He had felt it too. What was that?" I stammered, my voice trembling. I felt. "You felt the truth," his voice echoed in my mind, raw and shaken. "The amulet is not just a vessel for memory, it is a conduit. When you touched me, you completed a circuit that has been broken for millennia." I looked down at the black stone hanging from my neck. It seemed to pulse with a faint internal light, a captured star absorbing my shock and confusion. "I was her," I breathed, the realization a terrifying, liberating truth. For a second, I was Seraphine. Varen was silent for a long moment, the turmoil in his gaze slowly settling back into a deep, familiar sorrow. He looked at me, and his eyes held a new, aching intensity. The distance between us had vanished, replaced by a connection so profound it stole the air from my lungs. "Seraphine's body died," he said slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of his next words. "But her spirit, her duty, it was too strong to simply fade. It clung to the most powerful object she possessed, the one bound to her office, to her soul." He looked from the amulet to my face, his gaze searching for something, a ghost in my features. "It has been waiting," he continued, his voice a low, earth-shaking rumble that sealed my fate. "Sleeping within the obsidian, waiting for a soul with a strong enough echo of her own to awaken it. It has waited for a priestess with the same fire, the same defiance, the same rage against injustice." He held my gaze, and in that moment, I was no longer Leora Deneth, the disgraced priestess, the accidental sacrifice. I was something more, something older. "You are not her replacement, Leora," he said, the words striking the final, fatal blow to the world I had known. "You are her return." The words settled not in my ears, but in the very marrow of my bones. "You are her return." It was a proclamation that should have felt like an honor, a destiny revealed. Instead, it felt like an erasure. Every scar on my soul, every defiant thought I had ever nurtured, every ounce of rage that had defined me as Leora Deneth, it all seemed to shrivel in the shadow of this epic ancient priestess. I was not a hero. I was a vessel, a ghost wearing another woman's flesh. I scrambled to my feet, backing away from Varen, my hand flying to the amulet on my chest as if to tear it off. The obsidian felt warm against my skin, a parasitic life clinging to my own. "No," I said, the word a raw, ragged sound in the immense silence. "I am not her. Her name was Seraphine. Mine is Leora. I am the priestess who cursed you, not the one who loved you." The last words came out in a choked whisper, an admission of the truth I had felt in that fleeting, devastating memory touch. Varen did not move, but a deep, resonant sadness emanated from him, a palpable wave of energy that washed over me. "I have seen millennia pass, Leora. I know the difference between an echo and a soul. I do not look at you and see a ghost." His mental voice was impossibly gentle, a stark contrast to his terrifying form. "I see the same fire, yes. The same will that bends but does not break. But it burns in a different forge. Seraphine is a memory. You are a reality. Her spirit left a key, but you, Leora, you are the hand that must turn it." His words chipped away at the wall of my panic. He wasn't dismissing me. He was defining me. He saw my strength as my own. I stopped my retreat, my breathing still shallow, my heart a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. My eyes went back to the mural, to the featureless face of the woman carved in stone. Was it my imagination, or did the faint light from the crystals seem to catch the edges of the carving in a way that suggested my own profile? I shook my head, trying to clear the dizzying sense of vertigo. "A key to what?" I asked, my voice steadier now. "To your prison? How can I be the key to something I don't even understand?" "Because understanding is not where it begins," he rumbled aloud, the sound a comforting anchor in my sea of confusion. "It begins with acceptance. The prison that holds me is not merely stone and geography. It is a spell of profound complexity, woven from my own power and anchored to the history of your people. Their belief in my monstrosity feeds the corrupted flame. Their fear is the mortar in the walls of my cell." He shifted his immense weight, the sound like a minor earthquake. The scions of the unlit flame, the order that trapped me, they were masters of this kind of parasitic magic. They did not just imprison my body, they poisoned my legacy. They built a religion around my cage to ensure no one would ever dare look for the lock. The scions. I tested the name on my tongue. It felt ancient and malevolent. "Are they still here? After all this time?" A low growl vibrated in Varen's chest. "An ideology is harder to kill than a man. They endure. They pass their secrets from one generation to the next. A hidden rot within the world of men. They are watchers, waiting for any sign that my prison is weakening, waiting for any hint that the true nature of the flame might be rediscovered." His golden eyes narrowed, the light within them hardening into something sharp and dangerous. "Now that you have awakened the amulet, they will feel it. A ripple in the web of magic they have maintained for so long. They will begin to look for the source. They will begin to look for you." The cavern, my sanctuary, suddenly felt fragile, the walls too thin to protect me from a faceless ancient enemy. The fear I had held at bay for so long began to creep back in, cold and sharp. "Then what do we do? How do we fight them? How do we break this curse?" "We do not fight them," Varen said, his voice calm and resolute. "Not yet. Our first task is to heal the source. We must restore the hollow flame to its true state, the silver fire of creation that burns before you. If the heart of the prison can be purified, the walls will begin to crumble on their own." He looked from the small, serene flame to me. "But only the high priestess of the flame can approach it. Only the one who wears the amulet and shares its bond can soothe its corrupted half above." He was asking me to do the impossible, to face that raging pillar of white-hot energy and somehow calm it. The thought was absurd, suicidal. I would be incinerated before I took 2 steps. "Not as you are now," he corrected gently, "but the knowledge is within your grasp. It lies dormant, in the memories locked within the obsidian, within Seraphine's spirit." I flinched, my hand instinctively tightening on the amulet. "You want me to touch you again? To see more?" The memory of that first vision was still seared into my mind. The overwhelming intimacy, the feeling of being someone else, of loving a creature I had been raised to despise. It was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. "I do," he confirmed. "But you must be the one to initiate it. You must be in control. Do not let the memory consume you. Observe it, learn from it. You are Leora. You must remain Leora. Reach for her knowledge, but do not surrender your own soul." It was a test, a trial of will. Could I face the ghost inside me without becoming her? I looked at Varen, at the patient, ancient being who had placed his hope in me. The fate of his eternity rested on my ability to reconcile who I was with, who I was meant to be. My defiance, the quality that had led me to this moment, rose to the surface. I would not be a puppet for a spirit, nor would I be a coward. Taking a deep, centering breath, I walked forward until I stood once more before his colossal head. The warmth radiating from him was a tangible presence, a cocoon of primal energy. The air smelled of hot stone and ozone, a scent that was no longer frightening, but strangely familiar, like the smell of home after a long journey. "I am ready," I said, my voice clear and firm. He lowered his head, a silent offering, an act of supreme vulnerability. He was trusting me with the raw, unguarded memories of his most profound connection. and his most devastating loss. This time, when I reached out, my hand was steady. I placed my palm flat against his snout, over the intricate fractal patterns of his scales. The warmth was immediate, a deep, penetrating heat that sank into my bones. I closed my eyes, focusing on his instruction. Observe, do not surrender. For a moment, there was nothing. Only the feeling of his warm, living scales beneath my hand and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I focused my will, pushing a silent inquiry through the amulet, through my skin, into him. Show me what I need to know. The vision struck me not like a wave this time, but like a key turning in a lock. The world dissolved into a swirl of silver light. I was standing in this very chamber, but it was different. It was alive. The silver flame in the center was not a small, solitary fire, but a brilliant, burning pillar that reached to the crystalline ceiling, bathing the entire cavern in a light as bright as noon. The air hummed with a vibrant, creative energy that made my own spirit sing in harmony. I felt a presence at my side, a familiar, overwhelming power. I looked, and Varen was there, his scales gleaming in the silver light, his broken horn whole and perfect. He was not a prisoner, but a king in his own hall. And I looked down at my hands. They were my own, yet they moved with an innate grace, a deep understanding of the energies flowing around me. The amulet on my chest pulsed with a soft silver light, in perfect rhythm with the great flame. I was Seraphine, but I was also Leora, an observer inside her skin. I could feel her emotions, a deep sense of peace, of purpose, and a boundless affection for the magnificent creature beside her. But my own consciousness remained separate, a distinct point of awareness within the memory. The balance is weakening, Varen's voice echoed. Not in my mind, but in the memory, speaking to Seraphine. His voice was younger, without the ragged edge of millennia of grief. I feel it too, Seraphine's voice answered. And it was my own throat that formed the words, my own lungs that gave them breath. The mortal mages grow bolder, they draw too much from the world, and they give nothing back. They are a sickness. The scene shifted. We were no longer in the cavern, but standing on the peak of the mountain under a sky full of stars. The wind whipped my robes around me, cold and sharp. Below, in the valley where Etheria now stood, there were only scattered campfires. They will come for the flame, Varen said, a low growl of concern. They see it not as a heart, but as a weapon, a prize. Seraphine reached out and placed her hand on his snout, just as I had done. Then we will be ready for them, she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that resonated deep within my soul. You are its power, my friend. I am its will. Together, we are unbreakable. The vision flashed forward again, violently this time. The chamber was filled with smoke and the clang of steel. Men in dark robes, their faces shadowed, were there. The scions, they held staves of blackened wood that drank the silver light. The great flame was sputtering, faltering. I felt a searing pain in my side. I looked down and saw a dark crystalline shard embedded in my ribs, radiating a chilling, magic, deadening cold. I was falling. Varen roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury that shook the foundations of the world. He unleashed his fire, not the controlled warmth of creation, but a torrent of raw, white-hot annihilation. The leader of the scions, a man with eyes like chips of ice, smiled. He raised his staff, and the raw magic Varen had unleashed was caught, turned, and woven into a web of blindingly complex runes that flared to life around the dragon, around the flame, around everything. The last thing I saw through Seraphine's eyes was Varen's form being consumed by his own fire, his roar of fury turning into a scream of agony as his prison was forged around him. And I felt her last desperate act. She poured the last of her life force, her memories, her will, into the amulet, whispering a single word as her spirit fled her body. A name, Corvath. I was ripped from the memory, gasping, my hand flying back from Varen's skin. I stumbled backward, collapsing onto the stone floor, the name a poisoned icicle in my soul. The cavern was silent and dim once more, the great silver flame reduced to its single, lonely flicker. Varen was staring at me, his entire, massive form rigid. The magma in his scars glowed with a furious, agitated light. He had seen it all with me, relived the moment of his damnation, the death of his companion. Corvath, I breathed, the name tasting of ash and betrayal. That was his name. The growl that tore from Varen's throat was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a wound 1,000 ages old being ripped open anew. The very stone beneath me trembled with his rage. Corvath, he echoed, the name a curse. He was their leader, the architect of my damnation. He raised his head, and a gout of pure white flame erupted from his mouth, striking the far wall of the cavern with explosive force. The rock glowed white-hot, then melted and ran like water, leaving a deep, black scar. It was a display of raw, uncontrolled fury, the first I had truly witnessed. And yet I was not afraid. I saw past the rage to the immeasurable pain beneath. I got to my feet, my legs shaking, and did the one thing my old self would have considered suicide. I walked towards the enraged dragon. Varen, I said, my voice cutting through his rage. He froze, his head snapping down to look at me, the fire still licking at the edges of his maw. I did not stop until I was standing before him again, close enough to feel the convection of his fury on my face. I looked into his golden eyes, seeing the storm of 1,000 years of hatred. You said I was the hand to turn the key, I said, my voice ringing with a purpose I had never felt before. So let us begin. Let us unravel what Corvath has wrought. Together. My words were a balm on his ancient wound. The fire in his maw receded. The violent shaking of the cavern ceased. The tempest in his eyes calmed, leaving behind a raw, aching vulnerability that was more intimate than any touch. He lowered his head until his brow was level with my own. He was so close I could see the reflection of the silver flame, and my own determined face, mirrored in his golden gaze. He did not speak, neither aloud nor in my mind. He simply held my gaze, and in that shared silence, a new pact was forged. Not of a god and his sacrifice, but of a prisoner and his key, a warrior and his conscience, a dragon and his priestess. The fury receded from the chamber, leaving behind a heavy, ringing silence. Varen's rage had been a physical storm, and its passing left the air feeling thin and charged, like the aftermath of a lightning strike. The molten scar on the cavern wall glowed with a dull, cherry-red heat, a stark reminder of the power he kept leashed within him. He remained still, his head lowered before me, his golden eyes deep, unreadable pools of ancient history and fresh pain. In that silence, the path forward solidified in my mind. The vision, as traumatic as it had been, had not just given me a name for our enemy. It had shown me the path to victory. It was Seraphine's final, desperate act, a seed of knowledge planted in the amulet, waiting for fertile ground. The runes, I said, my voice cutting through the stillness. The ones Corvath used. I saw them. I remember how he wove them together. Varen's head lifted slightly, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, a dangerous and fragile emotion, igniting in the depths of his gaze. To see them is one thing, Leora. To unmake them is another. They are woven from my own essence. To touch them is to touch the raw heart of my power. It would destroy you. Not if I don't use my own strength, I countered, the plan taking shape, feeling less like my own creation and more like a memory rising to the surface. The hollow flame above. It is your power, corrupted and turned inward. What if I could reach it, not with my hands, but with my will? What if I could soothe it, just for a moment, and borrow a sliver of its true essence? He stared at me, his immense stillness a testament to the weight of my words. The idea was audacious, bordering on insane. To willingly connect with an artifact of pure destructive energy. You proposed to calm a hurricane by whispering to it. I proposed to remind it of the sky it once knew, I corrected softly. Seraphine knew how. In the vision, I felt her connection to the flame. It wasn't one of command, but of harmony. She didn't rule it, she resonated with it. I think I can do the same. This was the precipice, the moment all my defiance, all my newfound purpose, had been leading to. I was stepping fully out of the shadow of Leora, the resentful priestess, and into the role that had been waiting for me across 1,000 years of slumber. Varen considered my words for a long, silent eternity. The fate of his world, of his very existence, rested on a desperate plan conceived by a woman who, just days ago, had been his sworn enemy. A low rumble started in his chest, not of anger, but of deep, contemplative thought. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod, the gesture of a king committing his kingdom to a perilous war. "The chamber of the hollow flame is directly above us," he said, his voice a low, resonant bass. "The stone ceiling is thin here, a deliberate weakness in the prison's design. It is the heart of the cage. If you can focus your will through the amulet, you may be able to touch the flame's consciousness." He paused, his gaze boring into me with an intensity that was both a warning and a plea. "But if you feel your own self beginning to unravel, if you feel the rage of the flame trying to consume you, you must pull back. I would rather spend another eternity in this cage than see you burn for my freedom." His fierce protectiveness was a strange, warm shield around my heart. It gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I won't," I promised, my voice ringing with a conviction that was half mine, half Seraphine's. I walked to the center of the chamber, my bare feet silent on the polished stone, until I stood directly beneath the apex of the domed ceiling. I could feel it now that I was paying attention, a faint, oppressive vibration from above, the thrumming of the caged beast that was the hollow flame. It was a chaotic, angry hum that stood in stark contrast to the serene energy of the small silver fire, burning just a few feet away. Closing my eyes, I sank to my knees, crossing my legs and resting my hands on my thighs, palms up, in a meditative posture I hadn't consciously known. The gestures felt natural, instinctual, muscle memory from a life I had never lived. I clutched the amulet, its obsidian form a solid, comforting weight in my hand. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was an extension of my will, a lens through which I would focus my entire being. I took a deep breath, and then another, quieting the frantic beating of my heart. I pushed away the fear, the doubt, the identity of Leora Deneth, and focused only on the echo of Seraphine within me. I reached for her calm, her centeredness, her unshakable connection to the magic she had served. "Varen," I sent the thought out to him, my voice a whisper in the shared space of our minds. "When I begin, the Scions may feel it. They may try to interfere, to reinforce the spell. You must be my shield. I will be your fortress," he replied, his voice a bedrock of absolute certainty. "Nothing will reach you." I felt him move, his colossal body forming a living wall around me, his presence a bulwark against any conceivable threat. Safe within his circle of protection, I turned my full attention inward, and then upward. Using the amulet as a focal point, I extended my consciousness, not as a forceful probe, but as a gentle, unfolding tendril of thought. I pushed it past the boundary of my own body, through the silent air of the cavern, and towards the stone ceiling above. At first, I felt nothing but cold, inert rock. But I pushed deeper, guided by Seraphine's ingrained knowledge, searching for a specific frequency, a particular vibration in the magical lattice of the prison, and then I found it. It was like pressing my ear to a door behind which a foundry was raging. A dull, roaring chaos, a symphony of raw, undirected power, churning in an endless, agonizing loop. It was pure energy, stripped of all purpose, all consciousness. It was Varen's pain, given form. My first instinct was to recoil from the sheer, mind-numbing violence of it. But I held fast, remembering his warning. I did not try to fight it. I did not try to command it. I simply resonated with it. I let a single, pure note of intention flow from me, through the amulet. It was a note of peace, of stillness, the silver light of the true flame. I didn't send a command, I sent a memory. I projected the image of the cavern below, of the gentle, healing fire, of the silent constellations on the ceiling. I showed it a memory of what it once was. For a terrifying moment, the chaos intensified. The roaring grew louder in my mind's ear, the vibrations more violent. The flame was resisting, fighting against a memory it had been forced to forget. It was like trying to soothe a rabid animal by reminding it of when it was a pup. The rage lashed out, a wave of pure psychic heat that slammed against my mental shields. I gasped, my body tensing, the strain immense. The amulet grew hot against my skin, a burning focus for the energy I was channeling. Doubt clawed at me. This was impossible. The rage was too great, too absolute. But then, through the amulet, I felt something else, a whisper of Seraphine's strength. You are its will, her memory reminded me. Not its master, its partner. I changed my approach. Instead of just showing it peace, I acknowledged its pain. I let my own emotions flow into the connection, my own rage at the injustice done to Varen, my sorrow for his long imprisonment. I met its fury not with calm, but with empathy. I wrapped its roaring agony in my own quiet, determined grief. And that is what made the difference. Deep within the chaotic heart of the hollow flame, something shifted. A single, discordant note in the symphony of rage faltered. A flicker of recognition, a memory of a time before the pain. The roaring lessened, just for a moment, the psychic pressure easing almost imperceptibly. It was enough. A crack in the armor of its madness. I pushed gently into that crack, not with force, but with a steady, unwavering stream of shared emotion. I felt the flame's consciousness, fragmented and tortured as it was, begin to respond. A sliver of its raw power, no longer purely chaotic, detached itself from the raging whole and flowed down the conduit I had created. It poured into the amulet. The obsidian blazed with a white-hot light, so bright I could see it through my closed eyelids. The heat was immense, but it wasn't the destructive heat of a furnace. It was pure, refined power, scoured of its rage, ready to be wielded. It flooded my senses, a torrent of energy that would have annihilated me without the amulet to act as a transformer, stepping it down into a form I could handle. Now, Leora, Varen's voice urged in my mind, sensing the shift. Weave the counterspell, before it loses coherence. My eyes snapped open. The chamber was bathed in the brilliant white light radiating from the amulet on my chest. I lifted my hands, and the power flowed from the obsidian into my fingertips, tracing glowing lines of silver-white energy in the air before me. The runes from the vision were burned into my memory. I saw Korvath's hands weaving them, but now my own hands moved to unmake them. I began to draw the sigils in the air, not as he had, but in reverse. I pulled at the threads of his ancient spell, finding the knots, the anchors, the points of connection. As the first counter rune was completed, a deep groaning sound echoed from the very stone of the cavern. A tremor shook the floor, and dust rained down from the high ceiling. The prison was fighting back. From the corner of my eye, I saw Varen lift his head, a low growl of defiance rumbling in his chest. A shield of shimmering golden energy, invisible until now, flared into existence around us, deflecting a shower of shadowy tendrils that had begun to seep through the walls, the scions attempting to reinforce their work. I ignored the battle raging on the periphery of my senses and focused on my task. The second rune, the third, each one I drew in the air with liquid light, was a blow against the foundations of Varen's prison. The strain was unimaginable. My muscles screamed, my head pounded, and my spirit felt as though it were being stretched to the breaking point. The power I was wielding was monumental, and channeling it was taking every ounce of my will. I was on the final rune, the linchpin of the entire spell. As my glowing fingers traced its complex, final arc, the backlash hit. It was a wave of pure despair, a targeted psychic assault from the scions, an injection of utter hopelessness designed to make me falter at the final moment. Images flooded my mind, my sister's terrified face at the sacrificial altar, the sneering contempt of the elders, a vision of Varen falling, consumed by darkness, his light extinguished forever. My hand trembled, the line of light wavering. Leora. Varen's voice was a roar of desperation and fury in my head. But it was distant, on the other side of the golden shield he was maintaining. He was fighting his own battle. I was on my own. My will crumbled. The glowing rune began to fade. The power from the amulet sputtered. Noi. The word was not mine, and it was not Varen's. It was the calm, unshakable voice of Seraphine, rising from the depths of the amulet, from the depths of my own soul. It was a single, simple word, but it was forged with the iron of 1,000 years of purpose. It cut through the despair like a sword through smoke. My resolve hardened, reforged and stronger than before. I was Leora Deneth. I was Seraphine's heir, and I would not fail. With a final defiant scream that was torn from my own throat, I drove my will forward, completing the final rune. The moment the sigil was sealed, a soundless shockwave of pure energy erupted from it. The light I had woven exploded outward, striking the walls of the cavern. the ancient carved runes that covered the chamber, runes I hadn't even consciously noticed were there, hidden beneath the carvings, flared with a sickly black light. They were the true anchors of the prison. For a heartbeat they resisted. Then, with the sound of cracking stone and shattering glass, they began to break apart. A chain reaction of light and sound ripped through the chamber. The golden shield Varen had erected shattered. The shadowy tendrils of the scions dissolved into nothingness with silent screams. The power receded from my body as quickly as it had come. The light from the amulet faded, returning to its usual placid darkness. I collapsed to the floor, my limbs trembling, my body utterly spent, every muscle aching as if I'd been torn apart and put back together. Above, the angry, chaotic thrumming of the hollow flame had changed. It was still a roar, but it was no longer mindless. It was the roar of a king who realizes his chains have been broken. I looked up at Varen. The magma light in his scars was pulsing, no longer with rage, but with a triumphant, surging power. He took a step, then another, his movements freer, less constrained than before. He threw back his head and let out a roar that was not of fury or pain, but of pure, unadulterated liberation. It was a sound that did not shake the mountain, but promised to move it. He lowered his head, his golden eyes blazing with a fire that was no longer just sorrowful, but fiercely, brilliantly alive. He looked at me, lying spent on the floor, and for the first time, I saw an emotion in his gaze that was deeper than gratitude, more profound than partnership. It was awe. The first great chain had been broken, and I, Leora Deneth, had been the one to break it. The echo of my own scream faded, leaving my throat raw. I lay on the cold stone, a ship washed ashore after a tempest, every inch of my body an aching testament to the power that had surged through it. The brilliant, blinding light of the ritual had receded, pulling the impossible strength with it, leaving me hollowed out and trembling. I was Leora again, small and fragile in the vast, silent chamber. A shadow fell over me. I managed to lift my head, my muscles protesting with a fiery burn. Varen was standing over me, his colossal form a silhouette against the faint, silvery light of the restored flame. The oppressive heat of his rage was gone, replaced by a clean, potent warmth, like the air after a storm. The magma in his scars pulsed with a steady, rhythmic light, a slow and powerful heartbeat. He was different. The raw, agonized edge to his power was gone, planed away by the counterspell, leaving behind something sharper, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. He lowered his head, the movement fluid and silent, until his enormous golden eye was just feet from my face. The inferno of his grief had been banked, and what burned there now was a reverence so profound it struck me speechless. He saw not a tool, not a vessel for a long-lost spirit, but the woman who had willingly walked into the heart of his storm and calmed it. "You were magnificent," his voice resonated in my mind, not with the booming echo of a god, but with the quiet, awestruck tone of a man witnessing a miracle. He extended his snout, the gesture slow and deliberate, giving me ample time to pull away. I didn't. I held my ground, my heart fluttering in my chest. As he drew closer, the scent of ozone and deep earth filling my senses. He did not touch me with his claw, a tool of war, but with the smooth, warm scales of his face. He gently nudged my shoulder, a gesture so impossibly tender for a creature of his scale that it brought tears to my eyes. It was a silent thank you, a pledge of allegiance, an acknowledgement of the bond that now ran deeper than any memory. With a groan of effort, I pushed myself into a sitting position. Is it done?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. "Are you free?" A low rumble of negation vibrated through the stone. "The primary anchor is broken," he said, his spoken voice resonating with a new clarity, a new power. "The parasitic spell that fed on your people's fear is unmade, but the cage remains. Korvath was a master craftsman. He built redundancies, locks within locks. This was but the first and greatest chain." As he spoke, a tremor ran through the chamber, not the violent shaking of the ritual, but a deeper, more sinister vibration. The soft silvery light from the crystal constellations high above flickered, some of them dying out like snuffed candles. A low hissing sound began to emanate from the walls, and I watched in horror as a network of black, viscous veins began to spread across the ancient carvings like a creeping pestilence. A dark, oily substance, smelling of decay and old magic, began to drip from these cracks, sizzling as it hit the floor. "What is happening?" I cried, scrambling away from the encroaching corruption. Varen's head snapped up, a furious, protective growl tearing from his throat. His body coiled, placing himself between me and the weeping walls. "They know!" he snarled, his voice a blade of cold fury. "The Scions. Their first assault failed, so now they try another tactic. They cannot breach my sanctuary with force, so they seek to poison it from without. They are corrupting the very stone of the mountain, attempting to collapse it upon us." The situation had turned in a heartbeat. Our moment of triumph had become a desperate defense. The chamber, once a sanctuary, was rapidly becoming a tomb. Varen unleashed a controlled blast of fire, not the white-hot rage of the hollow flame, but a stream of pure, silver-tinged energy. It struck the corrupted wall, and the black ichor vaporized with a piercing shriek, but more of it simply seeped through to take its place. He was cauterizing 1,000 wounds while 1,000 more opened. He was powerful, but the assault was insidious, relentless. I watched, my feeling of helplessness a cold stone in my stomach. I was too spent to attempt another ritual. The power I had channeled was gone. I was useless. No, Seraphine's voice, now a familiar and comforting presence in the back of my mind. It was not a command, but a simple statement of fact. You are the will. He is the power. You are two halves of the whole. My gaze flew to the small, pure silver flame in the center of the room. It burned steadily, untouched by the encroaching darkness. It was the source, the heart. I did not have the strength to borrow its power, but perhaps I could guide it. Pushing my aching body to its limit, I crawled to the flame. Its gentle, heatless light bathed my face, a stark contrast to the encroaching gloom. The hissing of the corruption was louder now, the stench of decay thick in the air. I could hear Varen's roars of effort as he fought to keep the walls from caving in, each blast of his flame a defiant heartbeat against the encroaching silence. I didn't know if my plan would work. It was a desperate prayer, an act of pure faith. I plunged my hands not into the flame, but into the field of energy around it, the air thick with its pure, creative magic. It did not burn. It felt like sinking my hands into cool, living starlight. I closed my eyes, the amulet on my chest growing warm once more, a willing conduit. I did not try to pull the energy into myself. I became a bridge. "Varen," I cried out, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I can't wield the flame, but I can lend you its heart. Take it." Through our connection, I opened myself completely to him, lowering every shield, every barrier. I showed him the path through me to the pure magic of the silver flame. It was an act of total trust, an invitation to the very core of my being. I felt him hesitate for a fraction of a second, a silent question passing between us. He was asking for my consent to a bond so deep it would irrevocably merge our fates. I answered with a wave of pure, unwavering resolve. Together, a torrent of power, pure and clean as a mountain spring, surged from the silver flame, through my hands, through the amulet, and into the psychic bridge I had created between us. Varen's roar of effort changed. It became a triumphant bellow of pure, unadulterated power. The silver tinge of his fire deepened, brightening until it was no longer a dragon's breath, but a river of liquid starlight. He unleashed it. It was not a blast, but a wave, an expanding nova of pure, cleansing energy that erupted from him in all directions. It struck the walls of the chamber, and the black, creeping corruption was not just burned away. It was unmade, annihilated on a fundamental level. The hissing stopped. The dripping ceased. The dying crystals on the ceiling flared back to life, shining even brighter than before. In the sudden ringing silence, a new voice intruded into my mind. It was not Varen's. It was cold, ancient, and dripping with a condescending amusement that chilled me to the bone. "Clever little echo. You have your predecessor's talent for defiance. It will serve you no better than it served her." My head snapped up, my eyes searching the empty chamber. The voice was everywhere and nowhere. "Corvath," I breathed, the name a curse. "So the beast has told you my name," the voice sneered. "Has he also told you how she screamed when my blade found her heart? or how he wept trapped in the fires of his own making. He is a monument to my victory, priestess, and you are but a brief final flicker of a flame I extinguished an eon ago. Varen let out a guttural snarl of pure hatred. Show yourself, coward, he roared, his voice shaking the newly cleansed stone. Face me! All in due time, old worm, Corvath's voice echoed, fading now, his psychic assault concluded. The final lock to this prison is not in this forgotten hole. It is with me. If you wish for true freedom, you will have to come and claim it. And when you do, I will have the distinct pleasure of killing Seraphine all over again. The voice vanished, leaving behind only a lingering taint of malevolence in the air. The immediate threat was gone, but a far greater one had been revealed. The torrent of energy receded, and I collapsed forward, the bridge between flame and dragon broken. My hands fell from the field of light, and the world swam in a haze of gray. Before I could fall completely, something vast and warm caught me. Varen had moved with impossible speed, his massive head cradling my spent form, lifting me from the hard stone floor. I was resting against the warm, smooth scales of his jaw, his rhythmic breathing a deep, calming vibration against my back. I was exhausted, but I was not broken. I looked around the chamber, at the scarred but purified stone. We had won. We had faced the Scion's first true assault, and we had won. He's alive, I whispered, staring up at Varen. He has kept himself alive through means most foul, Varen confirmed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He has anchored his soul to the very spell that binds me. My prison has become his source of immortality. The final terrible piece of the puzzle clicked into place. So to free you, we must destroy him, he finished, utterly and forever. He gently lowered me to the floor, onto a patch of stone he had warmed with his own inner heat. He looked at me, the fury in his eyes tempered by a fierce, burning resolve. The sorrow was gone, burned away in the heat of battle, and replaced with a singular, incandescent purpose. He was no longer a prisoner waiting for freedom. He was a king preparing to reclaim his throne. The time for defense is over, Leora, he said, his voice the rumble of an impending avalanche. He has told us the truth. The final lock is not here. It is in the world of men, guarded by him and his acolytes. As long as we remain in this mountain, we remain in his trap. I knew what he was saying. I felt a thrill of fear, mingled with a fierce, exhilarating surge of determination. To leave the mountain, to face the world that had cast me out, to challenge an immortal sorcerer in his own fortress. It was madness, and it was our only path. I rose to my feet, my legs unsteady, but my spirit unwavering. I met his gaze, my reflection a tiny defiant spark in the vast golden pools of his eyes. The world thinks you are a monster, and I am a heretic, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. It seems only fitting we remind them what true power looks like. His own lips, a vast line of obsidian, curled back in what could only be a dragon's fearsome smile. The title of the chapter, the one I had feared, now blazed in my mind with a new triumphant meaning. We would not burn the world in a fiery apocalypse. We would burn away the lies, the fear, the rot of the Scions. Corvath believes you are Seraphine's echo, Varen rumbled, his voice filled with a pride that made my heart swell. He is a fool, an echo fades, but you, Leora Deneth, you are a fire rekindled. He turned his gaze toward the tunnel leading back to the upper chambers, back to the world. Let us go and burn his world anew. The air on the mountain's peak was thin and cold, scoured clean by a wind that tasted of starlight and new beginnings. Below, the world was a tapestry of sleeping shadow, the first hint of dawn a faint, pearlescent line on the eastern horizon. I stood on the precipice, the same one from Seraphine's memory, but the fear and impending doom of that vision were gone, replaced by a quiet, bone-deep peace. The ceremonial robes had long been discarded, and in their place, I wore simple, practical wool, though the obsidian amulet still rested in its rightful place against my heart, now a silent, contented weight. Beside me, a mountain of living obsidian and healed scars, Varen lay coiled, his immense body a warm and solid presence against the chill. The malignant, corrupted energy of the prison was gone from him. His power was a clean, thrumming force, as vast and steady as the turning of the world. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a king, It had been 3 moons since we had ascended from the mountain's heart, 3 moons since we had left the sanctuary of the deep halls to face Corvath and burn his world of lies anew. The memory of the final confrontation was a scar of fire and triumph on my soul. We had found him in a fortress of blackened iron and fear, high in the frozen wastes of the north, where he had ruled for centuries as a shadow god. He had expected Varen to come as a beast of mindless rage, and me as a fragile vessel for a spirit he had already defeated once. He had been wrong. Varen had met him not with brute force, but with the focused, strategic mind of a general who had spent millennia planning his campaign. And I had not been a weapon in Varen's hand. I had been his will, his focus. When Corvath had tried to turn Varen's own power against him once more, I had used the amulet not to channel the flame, but to sever the connection. I had reached into the heart of the ancient spell that gave Corvath his immortality and simply unraveled it. I had turned the key, and the lock had crumbled into dust. In the end, Corvath had died not by fang or fire, but as a mortal man, his stolen centuries catching up to him in a single, horrifying instant, leaving behind nothing but a whisper of dust and a legacy of ash. With his death, the last of Varen's chains had dissolved. We had felt it as a single, shared exhalation, a release of tension that had held a piece of the world captive for an age. The hollow flame, the raging, white-hot wound in the mountain, had finally gone out. It had not sputtered or died, but had simply resolved itself, its purpose fulfilled, its energy returning to the gentle silver heart deep below. We returned to Etheria, not as a monster and his captive, but as a sight from a forgotten age of myth. The people, my people, had cowered at first. But when Varen landed before the temple gates, not with a roar of wrath, but with a silence that spoke of immense, controlled power, and I dismounted from his back, whole and strong, their fear had turned to stunned, disbelieving awe. Elder Maeve, her face a mask of vindictive terror, had tried to brand me a witch, a dragon's consort who had doomed them all, but no one listened. They saw the truth in the clear, intelligent light of Varen's eyes. They saw the end of the annual sacrifices, the end of the fear that had been the bedrock of their faith. They saw not a curse, but a liberation. Maeve's power, built on the lies that had imprisoned Varen, crumbled with them. She was an elder with no one left to heed her bitter prophecies. Now, a new faith was being built in the valley below, not of fear, but of reverence, of balance. They were relearning the old ways, the partnership between humanity and the deep magic of the earth, a partnership personified by the priestess and the dragon, who watched over them from the peak. A low rumble vibrated through the stone beside me, pulling me from my reverie. Varen stirred, lifting his great head. His golden eyes, now free of the ancient sorrow that had haunted them, reflected the nascent light of the coming dawn. "Your thoughts are loud, Leora," his voice rumbled, soft and deep as the mountain's heart. I smiled, reaching out to lay my hand on the warm, smooth scales of his snout. The touch was as familiar and comforting as my own breath now. I was just remembering the first time I stood here, in another life. "And now?" he asked, his gaze holding mine. "Now I am making my own memories," I said. "I am no one's echo, Varen, and you are no one's prisoner. We are guardians." His voice echoed in my mind, a shared thought that was as much mine as it was his, as it was always meant to be. The sun began to crest the horizon, painting the underside of the clouds in hues of rose and gold. A new day, the first of many. Our victory had not been an end, but a beginning. There were other shadows in the world, other echoes of the Scion's greed. Our work was not done, but now we would face it together. Varen shifted, a ripple of movement passing through his colossal form. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment, his shape seemed to blur, to lose its solidity. The light of the rising sun bent around him, and the form of the great dragon began to contract, to change, the obsidian scales melting into shadows, the immense bones reshaping themselves. When the light settled, a man stood where the dragon had been. He was tall, his presence no less immense than it had been in his true form. His hair was the color of spun midnight, and his eyes were the same molten gold, burning with an ancient, gentle fire. The rugged lines of his face spoke of millennia of sorrow and strength, and faint silvery scars traced patterns on his skin, echoes of the wounds he had borne for so long. He was clad in simple dark clothing that seemed woven from shadow and starlight. This was the spirit within the beast, the king within the prisoner, a form he had not worn since the age of Seraphine. A form he could now assume, a choice he now had, because he was finally truly free. He reached out, his hand so impossibly large and yet so human, gently cupping my face. His touch was warm, real, a perfect blend of the dragon's primal heat and the man's gentle soul. Leora Emogtarsha, he said, and my name on his human lips was a vow. I leaned into his touch, my heart full to bursting. All my life, I had been defined by what I had lost. My sister, my faith, my freedom. I had cursed a monster, seeking an ending. Instead, I had found a beginning. I had found a truth older than stone, a bond forged in a fire that did not destroy, but created. The sun broke free of the horizon, bathing the peak in a wave of golden light. We stood together, dragon and priestess, man and woman, two halves of a song the world had forgotten how to sing. My journey began with a curse spoken in hatred. It ended here, with a silent vow whispered in the heart of the dawn. Ours was the dawn.